Breaking news now. The Supreme Court is allowing Virginia to purge suspected non-citizen voter registrations. This is a big decision from the Supreme Court. Just came in moments ago. I want to go straight to CNN's Paula Reed. Paula, what can you tell us?
Jim, this is incredibly significant because this is one of the court's first significant decisions ahead of next week's election. Here, they are allowing the state of Virginia to continue with a program that will purge suspected non-citizens from its voter registration rolls. Now, this is a bit of a surprise because the trial court and the appellate court sided with the Biden administration that objected to this purge, saying that the state cannot, under federal law, remove large groups of people from the voter rolls within 90 days of an election, though there is nothing stopping them from investigating individual voters and removing them from the voter rolls. Now, former President Trump has seized on this issue in Virginia, as have other Republicans, as a way that they should be able to remove suspected non-citizens, calling it sort of a common sense move. And here, a court divided across partisan lines, siding with Republicans. Now, Governor Youngkin, who is implementing or attempting to implement this program, he has issued a statement saying, quote, "This is a victory for common sense and election fairness."
And Paula, the former president is already stoking fears of voter fraud in Pennsylvania. But what are officials actually saying? Because we hear Trump out on the campaign trail said that there's already voter fraud happening in Pennsylvania. But what can you tell us?
That's exactly right. Well, here are the facts, Jim. Last week in Lancaster County, law enforcement officials announced they had identified what they described as incidents of suspected voter registration fraud. And this was according to a bipartisan board of elections and the county's district attorney. They said that this likely stemmed from large-scale canvassing operations that submitted registration applications with duplicate handwriting and inaccurate or unverifiable addresses. The officials said likely about 2,500 voter registration forms had been sort of put aside and segregated to be reviewed and investigated. But they have not said how many examples of actual fraud that they have found. They also said that they suspected 2 other counties could have received potentially fraudulent applications. But here, the former president getting out ahead of the facts, suggesting that there has indeed been fraud. Of course, Pennsylvania is one of the most sought-after prizes in the Electoral College, which is why we've seen the Trump team, the RNC, filing many legal challenges already in that state, laying the groundwork to challenge a potential outcome that doesn't go their way in a court of law. But here you see him also sowing seeds of doubt in the court of public opinion. Now, Governor Josh Shapiro spoke to CNN about these efforts last night. Let's take a listen to what he said.
I understand that Donald Trump wants to again, use the same playbook where he tries to, create chaos and stoke division and fear about our system. But again, we will have a free and fair, safe and secure election in Pennsylvania, and the will of the people will be respected and protected.
And Jim, we will continue to cover that investigation and bring our viewers any developments if this investigation does yield evidence of actual fraud.
CNN Chief Supreme Court Analyst Joan Voskupic joins me now. Joan, this is remarkable on a couple of levels. One, just the substance of the case, but the Supreme Court to hand down this kind of a decision 6 days before the election, I have to think that is going to raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court is in it now, Jim, and they're looking as divided as ever because the 3 dissenters from today's ruling are the 3 liberals. You know that this court is controlled by a conservative supermajority. What the justices did just in the last hour, Jim, was clear the way for Virginia officials to purge certain people from their voting rolls. Now, will only involve an estimated 1,600 people at this point, but what it does is potentially compromise a federal law that says that there should be a 90-day so-called quiet period before an election where people can't be systematically removed from voting rolls because they might be suspected of being a non-citizen, potentially based on outdated state data. So here, the Biden administration and immigrant rights groups, civil rights groups had challenged Virginia's sudden policy put in place in August by the governor there to do a broad-scale purge rather than individual purge of people who might be suspected of not being U.S. citizens. I want to state outright that, of course, only U.S. citizens can vote in federal elections and state elections here, so it matters. Lower court judges had sided with the challengers, the Biden administration, and said, no, it's too close to an election. It's within this 90-day safety period. But the Supreme Court today reversed it. And as I said, only the 3 liberal dissenters, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, dissented, Jim.
And Joan, the Supreme Court is also expected to act soon in another case, one from the important swing state of Pennsylvania. What do we know about that?
Yes, and that one, Jim, could be even more important because that involves, it's a dispute over provisional ballots there and who can cast them, particularly people who have tried to vote by mail, but there was some defect in their mail-in ballot, in particular that they didn't enclose that secrecy sleeve that is important under Pennsylvania law there. And the question is whether people who have been notified of some problem and essentially their mail-in ballot's been found to be void, whether they can separately cast a provisional ballot. Now, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had ruled that yes, they can. Pennsylvania Republicans, the Republican Party, have come up to the Supreme Court asking them to intervene. And what they say in particular, Jim, could have consequences for other disputes that could arise in the next 6 days. The issue is how a state court is allowed to interpret state law. And what the challenges are saying is that the state of Pennsylvania's highest court went too far. And that's something that could play into this conservative Supreme Court wanting to maybe tamp down state court interpretations of their own law. But we'll have to see. And that one, Jim, just so you know, we're going to see a filing come in this afternoon, and I expect that we'll see a decision from the Supreme Court either Thursday or Friday that would affect, as you say, this big swing state of Pennsylvania and potentially other states as more disputes come up to the high court.